Wānanga hia te pō, wānanga hia te ā, wānanga hia ngā take katoa o te wā. Nau hoki mai tātou ki tēnei kaupapa e ki anei ko Māori Conversations, huri noi te motu Māori ora ki a tātou. Tēnei te mihi atu ki tā tātou manuhiri kia Kingi Snelgar ko whakawātea mai ai anō. Kia noho mai ki tēnei takapau kōrero. E te whanaunga e kini, tēnā whakamohio mai ki te iwi ko waikoe he aha, nānei ngā tapu, ngā ihi, ngā mana ki runga i o Pukahiwi. E mohio ai rātou. Ko wai te whara, e kōrero ake ne.
Tēnā koe Eru, tēnā tātou. Huri no te motu, huri tēnei no Ngāti Hau. Mihi ana kia koutou. I noho nau te wānei o tāhu, mahi ana ki te kōti, hei roia mō rātou mai noho wahangu e noho i ngā whare hiri. Nō reira, mihi ana kia tātou katoa, e te pōnei.
Kia ora rā. Kia ora. We'll just get straight into our chat tonight. So the third question. So I want to start all the way back, not in 1840, but 1835 actually, and that's because Te Tai Tokerau, we have a profound and probably more significant connection to this thing that's come to be known as He Whakaputanga, or the Declaration of Independence that was signed in 1835. And so my taku pātai tuatahi ki a koe e Kingi, what is the significance you think of that document, if any, in modern society, tēnei wā toru nei, today, and how do we reconcile that with Te Tiriti or Waitangi? Do we think if there is such reconciliation to be done?
Good question. You could definitely write a PhD on that kaupapa, so I'll try to keep it brief. Whakaputanga is something in the north we're all familiar with. It's something that we grew up hearing on our marae. And it's something that I think is underestimated in our contemporary kōrero. We focus on Te Tiriti, which is really the marriage or the partnership between the Crown and Māori. But before that marriage, there was a declaration. It's like by Māori saying we're sovereign. And that sovereignty hasn't been ceded. So in 1835, we had Māori chiefs, a lot from the north, decide that they would, in international law, say that we're sovereign and other foreign countries of that sovereignty. So the two are definitely related, but the declaration is a proclamation or a statement that Māori have mana whenua, very clear terms. There wasn't any ambiguity around the two versions of the text, and that sovereignty was confirmed through Te Tiriti or Waitangi as well, but more so that wasn't about a marriage or an agreement between two parties. So they're quite different in terms of the legal status of them. And of course, we've had the Waitangi Tribunal confirm in the north that sovereignty wasn't ceded up until 1900s. So yeah, being from the north, I think it's something that we heard a lot on our marae. Well, I certainly did from some of my uncles growing up, and it's something that definitely needs to be talked about more today.
Tēnā koe, rawe nā kōrero. E meno, pehea nei o whakaro.
Hoino, tēnā no tātou katoa i te motu. So, wāku whakaro ki tēnei. Kingi, when you said, you heard of this as you were growing up, it's in my growing up, which was quite a while back, it's quite the opposite. You didn't hear about the treaty, let alone the treaty, and those that didn't come through in that way. There was a silence, really, until you had a wonderful group of Tai Tokerau activists just change all of that. And insist that we get to understand the 1835 and the 1840 agreements. So I guess and when I hear about it more and more in my reanga and older, they talked about interchangeably more and more now, and which is really positive. You know, I was reading some of Nuki's work just here in this book next to me, and Te Whai's opening of the Ngāpuhi Speaks document, and it just I guess what it reminds me of is from 1835 to 1840, they are significant times where they signal we had structure, we had system, and really in 2020, it's coming back, and we're going to bring it back and enforce it back into our own reality. So it's a good day.
I think another thing I think about my generation was the kohanga reo generation and the activism that happened in the 70s and 80s. One of my uncles, Richard Kake, he was a strong, mana motuhake sovereignty person, and hearing that kind of kōrero from a young age, I think definitely instilled in me the importance to learn more about it. It's something that our courts haven't caught up with. You know, in law, under Pākehā law, the treaty text is not a legal document. Treaty principles are what the court prefers. Treaty principles, in my view, are Pākehā interpretations of the treaty that fit within their framework of sovereignty. So it's a softening of the promise that our ancestors entered into. But our ancestors were very clever. I think getting the declaration signed was a very good move to declare our sovereignty. And as you said, it's a really exciting time because I feel like the world is waking up to racism, and part of that racism is recognizing that there are other ways of thinking and other legal systems, including our tikanga Māori. It's not just values; it is its own legal system. So, in Eru's lifetime, I'm excited about what might happen and where the law might go. It might be a bit, boring for some of our viewers, but I think one day we could have Māori nations with our own legal systems, and that's something exciting. At the same time, I'm always mindful that many of our people, through colonisation, through the court system, have become disconnected from their culture. So if we go on this journey of mana motuhake, of returning sovereignty, recognising sovereignty, there's a lot of people that I deal with in the court system that are disconnected, and I'm not sure what the answer is to make sure that we bring our people with us, that we don't, that there is a way to bring them back into their identity and who they are. Most of my clients are from up north, and so something interesting there.
If I can just mention, Eddie, the 3 other P's that came up on Saturday, which was not those 3 P's, it was poverty, prisoner, and patient. So, that's a reality. That's a horrible reality.
Yeah. And I want to draw as well on Warner Jackson's description of he whakaputanga. He calls it a precondition to Te Tiriti or Waitangi. And so if you think about it in that light, that you can't talk about one without the other. If you're going to talk about Te Tiriti or Waitangi, you have to talk about he whakaputanga as well. And Te Tai Kingi, it was strategic to have this affirmation, not a creation of independence. It was an affirmation or declaration of independence in the eyes of the imperial system. And that put us in good stead to then create the treaty. And of course, you'd never forget that the treaty, again, maintains our tino rangatiratanga. So those 2 things are linked. And I think there's a misconception that those 2 documents are inconsistent or that they sort of clash in some ways, but they are actually, they work in tandem. And I think Warner Jackson's description is perfect, describing he whakaputanga as a precondition to Te Tiriti or Waitangi.
I think you can get no one better than Moana to talk about professional stuff. And I think it's something that Pākehā need to be educated about as well. It's not just Te Tiriti. So,
it's got that. So I want to then talk about how we how we'd measure those two documents, the Te Tiriti and He Whakaputanga, how we'd measure those up against our current youth justice and criminal justice systems today. And I know, Kingi, you're very familiar with those workspaces, those contexts. And so do you think, this might be a bit of a loaded question, but do you think that those systems, how they operate, are they treaty compliant? Are they declaration compliant? And if not, why not? Pehane or whakaro?
Yeah, definitely not treaty compliant. There are some moves to acknowledge treaty principles or disparity between Māori and non-Māori, and say, for example, the Oranga Tamariki Act. But let's be clear, courts and social welfare are two of the main institutions that have colonised our people. The courts were used to take Māori land, and the welfare system was used to remove children from their whānau. And, you know, I see the outcomes of that welfare system in second and third generation tamariki Māori are just completely hammered by the welfare system. So to make a treaty compliant court system is going to be extremely difficult if we have that history of colonisation. And again, we go back to Moana Jackson, the rangatira, who's written about this in his reports, even Matu Mai recently, but also in He Whakaputanga about the justice system, that it's going to be very difficult to make a justice system that's about locking people up, mainly Māori, making that very compliant. You know, there are some good developments recently, like drug courts and Kōti Rangatahi, which again is open for criticism, and rightly so. But you know, for me, it's about, can we return some of these aspects to Māori to run their own justice systems, because things about the justice system, like restorative justice, come from Māori. The bad things come from our British colonial systems. So yeah, I think I'm pretty biased, I guess, but I'm definitely critical of the justice system, because it's the fruit is in the pudding. Look at the number of Māori that have been incarcerated, and so yeah. Sorry to be the bearer of bad news, but I know we all know this.
Yeah, tika tēnā koe I tō honesty. Te meno pehane o whakaro.
Restorative justice, the genesis of that is, we should claim that belongs and was designed out of a Māori worldview. I know, because I was there in it and in that part of that design. Family good conferences too, you know, whānau hui and its origins in I don't know, 72 times in that very first piece of legislation back then, which was dynamic, and we were really absolutely thrilled with the possibility of it being manifest in its full way. Well, it didn't, but ironically, in 72 countries that presented in a national conference in Wellington many years ago, might not have been 70, it might have been 60, all offshore came to New Zealand, presented back to us about family group conferences, and everybody clapped. The irony is that idea belonged here, and we were delivering it worse than anyone else in the world, but it belonged here. I remember the compliments running in that conference years ago and thinking, why are all countries across the world loving this idea and we can't deliver on it? So do I think that we go far enough is what we tried in 1989 and what we've attempted to do since then? It's nowhere near far enough. So in terms of what we're proposing under the party, we're going to take the big leap. No more little baby steps. You see, because every time we set up a family violence court, and every time we're really just trying to work around a system that is essentially screws us over. So really, it's time you just sweep it aside, make your own. That's what I'm really enjoying, and that's what we're planning for under the party. So welcome to that world. We're going to set it up ourselves. I can't wait. It's exciting and it's real.
Yeah, tika. And I think to to add to those examples, we have other things like the rangatahi courts, the matariki courts, other attempts, I guess, from the inside to try and alleviate some of the results of oppression, colonization, imperialism, all of those things that have a dire and acute effect on te iwi Māori. And they have some successes in some respects, and in other respects, again, they just come up against this this huge system that just dwarfs those attempts. And there's no critical mass, or there's no significant enough shift to have a meaningful long-term sort of effect. So I feel like a lot of these conversations inevitably end up talking about, again, go back to Moana Jackson, having an independent system for Māori, by Māori, and that again plays well into the Māori Party's narrative around whānau first, 25%, everything given to Māori, by Māori, for Māori. And I think we understand that that's going to work, and it always will work. And if we think back, our tupuna always thought the same thing. If you think about Te Rohe Pōtai, the Kingitanga, the attempts to set up Pāremata Māori, Te Kotahitanga, all of those things. So we're fighting that same fight. But the hope is that we're getting closer and closer, generation by generation. E tautoko ana I ngā kōrero.
Surely Edu too. I think surely we should be able to succeed and even fail forward on our own terms. So that's the worst thing. We're still, fumbling, stumbling, and living in impoverished and poverty conditions based on a whole other set of rules that don't even know how to say my name right. And so when it's so fundamentally poor and so fundamentally uneducated about us, then we can only end up failing. We can only end up in that space. So the system isn't broken. I heard this the other day. It is not broken. It is exactly what they want to occur. So, koia.
Kia ora. I totally support that. The system's doing what it's designed to do. Returning those, the ability for Māori to take care of our people is something that, say, in the Waranga Tamariki Act already exists. And the law's been in place for about a year and nothing has happened. And it's no surprise to me that nothing has happened, because Māori values are treated as window dressing in our systems. And all the good things about our care of tamariki and our justice system come from Māori values. And the quicker that we return those processes to our people to run, the less offending there'll be, and the less harm that will be caused. So I definitely support that initiative, and I can tell you, because I work in the court today, that it ain't working. Opening a court with te reo Māori, and then you resort back to Pākehā values of deterrence, accountability, and how can you deter someone when they are living in poverty, when they are offending because they are addicted to drugs and alcohol, and they are addicted to alcohol because they were abused as a child? So it's very short-sighted, our system. So I'm excited about reimagining, the whole approach.
Tēnā koe. And I'm glad you brought up oranga tamariki, or as I like to call it, matenga tamariki. But the reason why I'm glad you brought it up, in your experience, because you're across a lot of different spaces and youth justice, criminal justice, what are the connections or the links that you see between our babies there who are being taken away by matenga tamariki, who are being stolen from their whānau, and the rangatahi who end up in youth court, and then pakeke or older, adults, Māori adults ending up in court and then prison. What are the connections there, if any, Kingi?
There is a pipeline that starts with oranga tamariki care and protection processes. I work in the youth court. Nearly all of my clients have care and protection background. And in the district court, nearly all of my clients have a care and protection background. So there's absolute pipeline. And when the state becomes involved in the care of that child, you're already setting them up for that pipeline to Mariameno, which is very sad. And there are well-meaning people that work within these places, that work at Oranga Tamariki in the court, but the system itself is designed and doesn't work in a way that doesn't work for us. That doesn't value whānau, and undermines the whānau unit, and that is racist. So yeah, it's really sad, because it's not just one generation, it's 2 generations or 3 generations of SIFs doing this to our people. Parents that I deal with, they've been in SIFs care, and their children come, so it's like a cycle. And to break that cycle, it's not about small changes, it's about transforming our approach, and that takes leadership in Parliament, and bravery, because we might make mistakes. I don't think that we as Māori will say we're going to get it right, but certainly I strongly believe we'll do a lot better than Oranga Tamariki and corrections and the justice system, which spends billions incarcerating our people and removing our kids. So yeah, I think I support definitely what the Māori Party is talking about, and this kind of kōrero within you.
Tēnā koe. Ka whiua te pōro ki a koe, Meno.
Great. So Judge Beecroft agrees with me, and so does Professor, what's his worked on the study in Christchurch, Richie Poulton. And they agree with me because at that same conference, Judge Beecroft challenged Grania that things needed to change drastically, quickly, and in significant ways. Richie Poulton stood and said to Grania and everyone at that conference, it's going to be it'll happen too easily that you will slip back to what you've always known. And so from when I sat in that room with more than 200 staff and today, nothing has changed. Not a single thing has changed. And I did have hope for it, I've got to say. I thought this might be the opportunity. The thing that fails any of that that coming true is the leadership is hopeless and completely doesn't get us again. So that needs to change. The leadership of Oranga Tamariki, SIFs actually needs to change. We need to flip it out, tip it up, and make that bring that right Māori full-blown mana motuhake whakaaro into that leadership, and the ministers' level as well. I mean, it's their performance in the last 2 months, 3 months. They should be ashamed of how they think, behave, and project. They are the epitome of racism, and they just don't get it. They can't help themselves really. So that's the stuff that we have to tear down and replace.
Yeah, tika. I really agree with that point around it's the leadership that's the issue, and Kingi's actually alluded to it. There has been recent changes to the legislation that controls the Ministry for Children and what they do, as well as the youth courts and the family courts and how they operate. So there's all this new law, and it looks really good actually if you read it. There's words such as mana, whakapapa, whanaungatanga, all of these things that you'd think, oh man, this is pretty Māori stuff. This looks good. This looks positive. So the problem is not actually the law itself. It's the people. It's the people that actually practice and are meant to implement those things. And if I think about it in the context of the family court or the youth court, there's absolutely no point in having mana, whakapapa, whanaungatanga, all of those things in this piece of law that a judge has to consider when it's presumably a white judge who wouldn't know what any of those things were if it slapped them in the face. So that's why these things don't result in any tangible change, and it's just the wheels are just turning like they always did. And yeah, that's a real hoha. I wrote this thesis about how hoha I am about it, and some judges are listening, but most of them aren't. So yeah.
And back in 1989, Judge Beecroft mentioned at this in this conference, and he said back in '89 he saw the words whānau hapuniwi in the Children, Young Princes and Their Families Act. He remembers reading it, and he said recently, if I'd known what it all meant, what hapu meant, what iwi meant, what all of that meant, I might have done something. I might have done more. But he was focused on whānau, and good on him. You know, e tangata Pākehā, he aroha ki te Māori, aroha ki te kaupapa. But even today, that's what he realised as something that he wished he had done more about and more determinedly. So you know, ko tai te wā. Yeah.
He kōrero anō, Kingi?
Oh, I think also when you're saying that we have Pākehā words, but the actual court and the law is designed in a Pākehā way. So the house that we're using these phrases in the whare is Pākehā. So we can try use te reo Māori and our tikanga within these Pākehā institutions. But if it's actually the foundations and the house is white, and it's filled with white people, trying to use our culture, there's a risk that it might be misappropriated, and just not used. And certainly within the last year, 7AA of the Oranga Tamariki Act hasn't been implemented, and I try to raise it as much as I can, but I'm not surprised that things haven't progressed, because Oranga Tamariki isn't equipped. It should be our people that does it.
When I was recently back in the department to Eru and I, one of the team put up this is when I knew, man, this is just this is not working, and what am I doing here? So she'd put up a poster about white privilege, right? So that's just part of how we should be thinking, and I was rung from Wellington to take it down. And it was my one up just said, take that down. That's not how we talk about this sort of thing in the department. That's when I'm like, wow. First get some education, put your fragility away, and let's look at really what's happening here. So of course then I didn't get reappointed. But there you go, you see, disruptors, thank goodness really, because we've just got to disrupt and take it down at a whole other level.
Loving the just the value of the kōrero that's being shared. Hey, whakakapiake, it's the last pātai to finish off. So and it kind of just running on the theme that we're following. Kingi, you've been quite involved in the whole. I guess it's a mission. I guess that a lot of Māori lawyers are on to see tikanga Māori return in some respects as the governing law of Aotearoa, particularly in tandem with Pākehā law and the Pākehā legal system. What are the risks that you see in that, and also do you think that could lead to genuine and meaningful results for te iwi Māori?
Yeah, I think if you were to use what we've talked about with Oranga Tamariki, the same risks apply if the legal house is Pākehā, and you're trying to introduce Māori values to be decided by Pākehā judges. There's a real risk that they might misappropriate it or get it wrong, and that's something that that I'm worried about as well. If we have tikanga Māori as a recognised in our courts, that there might be worries with that, and I've got to be careful because I was involved in a case that argued that, but I accept that it's right to criticise it, and we need people to agitate to make sure that we don't just have tikanga included in the law and then being decided by Judge so and so from Remuera, who has no idea what mana means or what ahara is. So it's going to be your generation that will have to keep arguing these points, because besides Justice Joe Williams in the Supreme Court, there are no other judges in in the Court of Appeal, we have very few in the High Court. And even if we stacked it with Māori judges, what are the values that govern these court systems, their Western values? So, for me, it's about having our own judicial systems, our own dispute resolution processes, and empowering those and bringing our issues to those processes to our marae to decide, rather than leaving it to Pākehā courts, which is a big thing, but I think it's achievable. It's part of our nation building to have our own dispute resolution systems.
Yeah, I think it's having our own everything system, like everything, every single thing. And I think it's time. What are we waiting for? Really, ko tai te wā. And when I'm reading this Ngāpuhi Speaks document here, when I'm listening to smart and ready to go lawyers like yourself, Kingi, I saw you stand across the world and I see you back here standing for us. There's no question we are ready. We are absolutely ready. The thing we have to do is be brave enough to take that step. I had a young GP Māori the other day ask me, well, we're talking about the dreams, and he wanted for some real brave leaders to take that step, and I'm up for taking that big step. No more little baby steps. I've seen too many mokopuna taken out of their homes. I've seen too many of our kaumātua die before their time. I've been too many of our young Māori men and women, interviewed, chucked in, and been completely misunderstood and mistreated. And so then in Tai Tokerau, our suicide numbers just go through the roof. So, we can do, and we are ready to do way, way better. We just need the resource. $5 billion is a good start. 25% is $5 billion first 2 years. That's a great start. Okay. And it is merely the start, because we're entitled to more. $5 billion is a great start. So, koia.
Tēnā tātou. Well, ko te kōrero whakamutinga, he mihi noi hoki a koe, Kingi. You're a busy man, mate, and I'm really glad that you've been able to join us tonight, and especially considering my last minute call to you last night. Kia hona mai ki te kaupapa. But thank you so much, cuz, and it's been great to have you on board. O tira, te iwi e whakarongo mai ana, e mihi ana kia tātou e noho tahi nei tēnei pō. Tihei, mauri ora.
Kia ora, pōmari.
Pōmari.